The steering wheel felt like a vice grip in my hands, squeezing the life out of me as my mind unraveled. My chest was compressed, each breath a struggle against an invisible weight. I couldn't believe my eyes. My wife's bra, a piece of lingerie I knew intimately, lay abandoned on the backseat of my brother's car. A hurricane of questions battered my mind. How? Why? Since when? Absurd explanations began to form, but none could disguise the brutal truth staring back at me. I tried to suppress the rising tide of madness within my chest, but the image wouldn't fade. That bra wasn't anything that could be mistaken. It belonged to her. Its presence in my brother's car was the horrifying answer I wasn't prepared for. How did I know it was hers? Simple. I knew it by heart, every detail, the size, the style, even the faintest trace of color. But the most damning evidence was the lingering scent, her perfume, a ghostly echo of a painful memory, strangling my sanity. I used to love the way that scent filled the air whenever she walked into a room. Now, it made me want to vomit, a cruel reminder of the betrayal I was forced to confront. Just a few months ago, everything was different. I, Lion, never could have imagined this descent into chaos. My family had it all, a life of unimaginable luxury. We lived in a grand mansion, part of the most elite social circles in the region. My father was a successful businessman, my mother a powerful woman with an impressive academic pedigree. Our home housed 5 of us: my parents, me, my brother Ralph, and our younger sister Emily, who was still in high school. Ralph wasn't my biological brother. He was adopted by my parents when he was a small, skinny, and timid orphan. I remember those early days, how he'd shy away, never making eye contact, as if afraid of disturbing the harmony around him. But slowly he opened up, integrated into our lives, and became an inseparable part of our family. Ralph had a warm heart, always knowing how to make others feel safe and cherished. Since we were kids, Ralph, Rose the girl who lived next door, and I were inseparable. We grew up together, sharing everything from the innocent mischief of childhood to the secrets of adulthood. But when I turned 24, I realized I no longer saw Rose as just a friend. My feelings for her had changed, evolving into something deeper, more intense. Rose, with her gentle beauty and warming smile, captivated my heart. I couldn't lose her. So, after careful consideration, I decided to speak to my parents about marrying Rose. They, of course, were entirely supportive. With our family standing, Rose's parents readily agreed to the proposal. She said yes, and within a few days we were married in a lavish and extravagant ceremony. In the early days of our marriage, I showered Rose with affection. She had a strange allure that I couldn't resist. If she wanted something, I bought it. When she expressed a desire to pursue stock market investments, I didn't hesitate to offer my support. Rose even asked for a loan to start a small company. And of course, being her devoted husband, I readily agreed without a second thought. One evening, after dinner, Rose sat beside me, her charming smile playing on her lips. She always knew how to make things easy, and I was even more powerless to resist her. "Honey, I have something to discuss with you," she said, her voice as sweet as honey. "What's on your mind, darling?" I smiled, raising my wine glass to my lips. "I've been thinking. I want to try something new. I've been researching stocks and some small businesses. I want to invest and start my own company, so I can manage it myself and have more control." Rose looked at me, her eyes sparkling with confidence and expectation. I set my glass down and leaned towards her. "Really? Are you sure you want to do this?" "Yes, I'm sure," Rose smiled, her hand reaching for mine, her voice pleading. "But to start, I need a bit of capital. Not a lot, just enough to kickstart things. You can help me, right?" I looked into her bright eyes, my heart sinking a little. She always had a way of making me feel like I was the most important person in her life. I loved her deeply, and how could I refuse her? "Okay, Rose, how much do you need?" "I'll take care of it," I nodded, my hand tightening around hers, wanting to see her happy. Rose beamed, resting her head on my shoulder. "I knew you'd be amazing. I just need about $500,000 to start. I'll manage it wisely and turn it into a success quickly." The amount surprised me a little, but I nodded, not hesitating further. "I trust you, Rose. If this is what you want, I'll help you however I can." "Thank you, Lion. I promise I won't disappoint you." She kissed me lightly on the cheek, her eyes filled with delight. I looked at Rose, her ambition and enthusiasm radiating. It was what I loved about her, her relentless drive and unwavering confidence. Little did I know, my blind love would lead to suspicion and loss later on. The next morning, as promised, I arranged for the funds for Rose, even adding a little extra for contingencies. It wasn't a big deal for me. The important thing was to see Rose happy and confident with her project. Investing in her wasn't just about love, it was about seeing her achieve what she desired. When I handed Rose the check, she looked like she couldn't believe her eyes. Her eyes lit up like a child who had just received their most cherished gift. She rushed towards me, embraced me tightly, and kissed me for a long time on my cheek, forehead, and then my lips. "Thank you, Lion, you're incredible," Rose exclaimed, her voice overflowing with joy. "I can't believe you arranged everything so quickly." I laughed, holding her close. "I promised, didn't I? Don't forget me when you're successful." Rose laughed loudly, her eyes mischievous as she looked at me. "Of course. When I'm successful, I'll repay you tenfold. I'll be the richest wife, and you won't have to worry about a thing." I teased back, my eyes full of affection. "So when you become the richest businesswoman, don't forget that I was your initial investor. Otherwise, I'll demand a very high interest rate." She burst into laughter, lightly punching my arm. "What kind of high interest rate? How about another mansion?" I pretended to think for a moment, then winked. "A mansion is good, but I think I'd prefer you to cook for me every night. Now that's the real reward." Rose giggled, hugging me tighter. "Then I'll cook you a lavish dinner when I'm successful. How does that sound?" I wouldn't refuse that, I joked, kissing her gently on the forehead. We both laughed, playfully teasing each other. The atmosphere was so easy, filled with laughter and simple happiness. I couldn't imagine that these sweet days would change. I assumed everything would remain idyllic, that the joy I saw in Rose's eyes was all we needed for a fulfilling life. Rose immediately set to work on her plan after receiving the capital from me. She spent most of her time researching the market, analyzing stocks, and diligently learning about how to invest for profit. Sometimes I would see her staying up late in front of her computer screen, her eyes focused, patiently tracking every minor market fluctuation. Initially, things weren't very promising. The stocks Rose chose didn't yield the expected returns, and at times, even lost value. During those nights, I noticed a hint of disappointment cross her face. Rose didn't say much, but her eyes, despite her efforts to remain optimistic, still reflected a flicker of anxiety. I knew she feared she had let me down. One night, as I sat beside her on the couch, Rose sighed, then rested her head on my shoulder. "Lion, maybe I misjudged the market," she said softly, her voice tinged with sadness. I smiled, wrapping my arm around her. "Don't worry too much, Rose. Investment always involves risk. The important thing is that you dared to try and are learning. I believe in you." She looked up at me, her eyes shining with faith in my words. "You always have faith in me. That's why I can't give up." And so, from those early setbacks, Rose grew even more determined. She spent more time researching, testing new strategies, and learning from her mistakes. As each day passed, I saw her grow more confident, as if each stumble was merely a stepping stone to greater heights. Then, one day, her efforts began to pay off. The stock she had chosen gradually recovered and started to rise sharply. At first, it was small profits, but then, with her sharp mind and unwavering dedication, Rose began to make significant gains. She had earned enough money to open her own small company, making her dream a reality. On the day everything came together, Rose couldn't hide her elation. She ran towards me, her eyes sparkling, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Lion, you won't believe it," she exclaimed, her voice trembling with emotion. "I did it. The company, the capital, everything is complete. I couldn't have done it without you." I looked at her, smiling gently. "I knew you would, Rose. I knew you could do it." Rose threw herself into my arms, hugging me tightly as if she didn't want to let go. She burst into laughter, but there was a glimmer of tears in her eyes. "You're the best husband. I owe you so much, Lion. If it weren't for you, I could never have made this happen." I gently stroked her back, feeling happiness overflowing in my heart as I saw Rose achieve the success she had always desired. "You don't owe me anything, Rose. I just want to see you happy. That's the most important thing." Rose looked up at me, her eyes shining brightly. "I'm going to make this company even bigger, and I'll make you proud." I laughed, placing a light kiss on her forehead. "I'm already proud of you, Rose." In that moment, I saw in her eyes a happiness and a determination that was undeniable. Rose had succeeded, not just because of the money I had given her, but because of her perseverance, dedication, and creativity. And seeing her stand there, beaming with the joy of victory, I felt like the luckiest man alive. Rose began building her own company with an incredible amount of confidence and determination. She hired her first employees, organized interviews, and carefully selected the right people to help her grow the business. She told me about every step forward, every strategy she had devised, and I always supported her. Even though my time was becoming more limited, my work at the family business was getting increasingly demanding. After graduating from university, I knew that one day I would inherit my father's company, but I never felt pressured to rush into it. However, my father had decided it was time for me to start learning seriously and begin taking over the company step by step. Shareholders' meetings, detailed financial reports packed with numbers, complex business strategies, it all awaited me. That morning, as I had to attend an important shareholders' meeting, my mind felt a little distant. Rose was in the process of recruiting employees, and I couldn't be there to support her. I knew she was confident and capable, but there was still a part of me that wanted to be there, to watch her every move. However, the family business was a bigger responsibility that I couldn't ignore. As I entered the large meeting room, I saw everyone getting ready. My father, with his imposing presence, sat at the head of the long table, discussing the company's development strategy with the shareholders. Ralph was also present, sitting quietly at the end of the table, listening intently. He didn't say much, but his eyes conveyed his intense focus. I took my seat, opening the thick folder of documents in front of me. My father began his presentation, his voice confident and experienced. I listened carefully, but my thoughts kept drifting to Rose. Was she recruiting the right people? Was her company progressing as she had hoped? The meeting stretched on for hours, with the shareholders engaging in heated debates about future plans. Ralph, as usual, remained discreet, occasionally asking insightful questions, but still making it clear that he was deeply invested in the work. This made me secretly admire him, although I couldn't help but feel a pang of envy. Ralph had always been thoughtful, composed, and despite being adopted, he always held a respected position within the family. After the meeting ended, my father patted me on the shoulder as we left the room. "You did well today?" Lion, starting to grasp the complexities of the company. "Are you?" I smiled, but my heart wasn't entirely at ease. "Yes, but I still have a lot to learn. There's so much to absorb." "That's right," my father said, a hint of pride in his eyes. "But you'll master it. Just keep moving forward, step by step." When I returned home, I realized how long the day had been. Rose was waiting for me in the living room, her eyes shining with confidence. "You won't believe it," she exclaimed, her smile wide and bright. "I've recruited an amazing team. Things are moving faster than I thought they would." I sank into a chair, the fatigue of the meeting seeming to melt away as I saw her joy. "I knew you would," I replied, giving her a gentle smile. "I'm sorry I couldn't be there for you today?" Rose shook her head, coming to sit beside me. "It's okay, Lion, you have your own work, and I'm very proud of what you're doing. I know you'll inherit your father's company with distinction." She rested her head on my shoulder, and in that moment, all my worries seemed to fade. Weeks flew by, and my life became busier than ever. Work at the family business demanded more and more of my time, and I had to learn countless new things from business strategies to complex financial management. The tense meetings and lengthy presentations kept my mind on edge. I knew I couldn't miss any opportunity to learn because the future of the entire family depended on my inheriting the company. But in return, I had less and less time for Rose day after day. I could only call or text her, asking a few questions, trying to maintain a connection. But I knew it wasn't enough for Rose. When I got home, I was often too exhausted to chat or confide in her. All I wanted was to lie down and relax after a long day. But Rose wouldn't stop complaining. She began to sulk, sometimes refusing to respond to my messages or pretending to be busy when I wanted to talk. One evening, when I got home, Rose was sitting on the couch with cold eyes, clearly angry. "Are you angry again?" I sighed, sitting down beside her, my voice heavy with fatigue. "What do you think?" Rose replied, her voice icy. "You're busy all week, you don't have any time for me. And when you get home, you don't even say a few words. Do I even mean anything to you anymore?" I tried to explain, but every word I uttered only seemed to make Rose angrier. She wasn't the type to easily let things go, and appeasing Rose was always a big challenge. I knew I had to find another way, because her sulking was only making me more tired. Finally, with no other options, I pulled out my black card from my wallet and handed it to her. "Rose, I know I'm busy and I can't be with you much, but I'm really trying. Take this. If you want to go shopping or hang out with your friends, use it freely. Just don't be angry with me anymore. Let me rest a little." Rose's eyes lit up as she saw the black card, a look I recognized instantly. But she maintained her indifferent expression, pretending not to care. "Do you think money can buy forgiveness?" she said, her voice tinged with defiance. I knew this game of Rose's, and I knew how to make her calm down. I walked over and gently embraced her, feeling her breath mingle with my heartbeat. "Rose, I'm not just using money to make you happy, but I know I've been neglecting you. Just understand that I really need this time to do things right, and I'm always thinking about you, no matter how busy I am." She remained silent for a few seconds before finally relenting, resting her head on my chest. "Okay, I won't be angry anymore, but you owe me a shopping trip." I laughed, kissing her gently on the forehead. "I promise. As long as you're happy and you let me rest a little." Rose smiled faintly, her eyes softening. Though she sometimes sulked, I knew she understood me too. She just wanted to be loved and cared for more. Those moments reminded me that, no matter how stressful work was, my family and the people I loved were always the most important. That day, my father's company held a grand party, an event that everyone knew was an opportunity for businessmen, shareholders, and investors to mingle and build relationships. As the future heir of the company, I couldn't miss it, and of course Rose, both as the owner of her own small company and as the wife of the future president, would accompany me. That evening, Rose made an appearance that was so stunning it drew all eyes to her. She chose a fiery red evening gown that hugged her body, showcasing her captivating curves. The dress had a high slit from the leg up to the thigh, creating a seductive yet elegant look. The gown was paired with sleek black heels that added to her elegance. Rose's dark, glossy hair was styled in soft waves cascading over her shoulders, creating a look that was both glamorous and sophisticated. Around her neck was a delicate diamond necklace, a gift I had given her for her birthday, sparkling under the twinkling chandelier lights of the ballroom. As she took my arm and walked into the party, I could feel the pride in her eyes, not just for being the woman beside me, but because she was now a successful businesswoman, steadily building her own reputation. "You look incredible tonight," I whispered into her ear, my eyes never leaving her stunning beauty. She turned to me, a sweet smile playing on her lips. "Thank you. Tonight's a big deal, I have to do you justice." We walked into the ballroom, the eyes of guests constantly drawn to Rose. I could see admiration, even envy, from other ladies. Rose wasn't just beautiful, she had a powerful magnetism that drew people in. Throughout the party, Rose wasn't just the wife standing beside me to create a beautiful image. She quickly blended into the crowd, holding a glass of red wine and starting to mingle with potential investors. Somehow, she always knew how to initiate conversations in a sophisticated way, without losing her grace and elegance. I stood from afar, observing her, proud not just of her captivating beauty but also of the intelligence and confidence Rose projected. She wasn't just my woman, she was a true partner in life and work. Rose went from table to table, raising her glass in toasts and conversing with people, and with every smile and handshake, she built important relationships, making people see her not just as Lion's wife but also as a formidable businesswoman. As she returned to my side, taking my arm with pride, Rose whispered, "I've talked to some very promising people. There might be a new collaboration opportunity for my company soon." I smiled, gently squeezing her hand. "I knew you'd do well. You're not just worthy to be by my side, you're an exceptional woman who built her own success." Rose looked up at me, her smile radiant, but her eyes were full of meaning. "We're a team, right?" "Absolutely," I said, kissing her lightly on the cheek. "We'll move forward together." We stood there, in our elegant attire, amidst the twinkling lights and laughter of the party, realizing that this was the life we were building together, a life full of challenges, but also filled with potential and opportunities. Rose looked up at me, her smile radiant, but her eyes were full of meaning. "We're a team, right?" "Absolutely," I said, kissing her lightly on the cheek. "We'll move forward together." But before that beautiful moment could settle, a familiar figure suddenly appeared. Louisa, a wealthy and arrogant heiress, approached us. She was wearing a dazzling evening gown, but her arrogance and defiant eyes couldn't be concealed. Louisa, a former classmate of mine, had once confessed her feelings, but I had rejected her. I still remembered her words at the time, "I won't give up that easily." As Louisa passed by us, she accidentally spilled her glass of red wine onto Rose's dress. The wine's strong scent filled the air, staining Rose's bright red dress a darker shade. But what enraged me most was Louisa's mocking smile and sneering eyes. "Oh, I'm so sorry, what a clumsy me," Louisa said, but her tone was clearly devoid of any remorse. She turned to Rose with icy eyes. "So this is your wife, Lion? I thought you'd marry someone more your class. Isn't she just a gold digger?" Rose stood there, silent, but I saw the hurt flicker in her eyes. I knew I couldn't let this go any further. Louisa, with her arrogant and venomous nature, always sought to hurt those around her if she didn't get what she wanted. I took a deep breath, maintaining my composure despite the rage boiling within. "Louisa, this has gone too far," I said, my voice calm but cold. "I think it's best if you leave right now." Louisa scoffed, still maintaining her challenging gaze. "Oh, Lion, what a pity. You're still protecting her. But it's okay, no worries. After all, gold diggers will always be gold diggers." I didn't want to cause a scene, but I knew I couldn't let her continue to insult Rose. I immediately called security, asking them to escort Louisa out of the party. "I think this party isn't suitable for you, Louisa. Please leave." As Louisa was led away by security, I turned back to Rose, whose eyes still held a trace of shock. I removed my jacket and gently placed it over her shoulders, covering the wet stain on her dress. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. Rose nodded slightly, but I could clearly see the exhaustion in her eyes. "If you're tired, you can go to the room to rest. I'll handle everything here," I said, trying to comfort her. She smiled weakly, clutching the jacket tighter. "Thank you, but I'll be fine. Don't worry about me." I gently took her hand, sensing her vulnerability in this moment, wanting nothing more than to shield her from everything bad. "You're always worthy of everything. Don't let her words affect you," I whispered. Rose looked up at me, a sad but determined smile forming on her lips. "I know. With you by my side, I never have to worry about that. But now I need to go to the bathroom. Give me a minute." I watched as Rose withdrew, unable to shake off my worry and love, vowing to protect her. Rose entered the restroom, her high heels clicking softly on the luxurious marble floor. The interior was lavishly decorated with a large gold-plated mirror and a sink adorned with shiny gold, but no matter how elegant the setting, nothing could conceal the anger burning within her. Rose went to the sink, staring intently at her reflection in the mirror, seeing herself still beautiful, but now stained with wine. She gritted her teeth, her hand clenching into a fist. "You bitch," she muttered, remembering Louise's scornful eyes. "You think I'm a gold digger? You have no idea. One day, everything will be mine. Everything, and I won't have to depend on anyone." Rose's words, quiet yet laced with anger, echoed in the empty space of the restroom, unaware that someone had been listening for some time. Ralph emerged from the corner of the door, arms crossed, his cold eyes fixed on Rose through the mirror. "You're not a gold digger," Ralph spoke, his voice cutting through the rage bubbling inside Rose. She jumped, turning to face him. Ralph, in his dark suit, leaned against the doorjamb with a mocking smile playing on his lips. "I heard everything." Rose looked at him with icy eyes, but didn't falter. "Hear what, Ralph? I was talking to myself, none of your business." Ralph scoffed, his eyes filled with judgment. "Oh, but I heard it all. And don't pretend. Everything you just said, very interesting. You said you won't depend on anyone, that everything will be yours. Sounds like you're no different from me. You want more from this family too, don't you?" Rose stared at Ralph for a moment before responding. "I'm not a gold digger. I'm building my own career, and one day, I'll have everything I deserve." Ralph raised an eyebrow, still holding that mocking smile. "Yes, I understand that feeling. Feeling overlooked, treated like an outsider, like nothing more than decoration in this perfect family." Ralph straightened, taking a step towards Rose. "Lion treats me well, but it's just pity. I've lived a double life my whole life to survive in this family." Rose frowned, not fully understanding Ralph's intentions, but the disdain in his voice couldn't be ignored. "What do you want, Ralph?" she asked, her voice cold. Ralph took another step towards her, his eyes darkening. "I want to partner up. If you want everything to be yours, maybe we can help each other achieve that." He looked directly into Rose's eyes, his gaze unwavering. "We don't need to live under Lion's shadow forever. You have your goals, I have mine. If we work together, we might achieve what we want." Rose remained silent, her gaze meeting Ralph's through the large mirror. His words were full of innuendo, and she knew he wasn't just talking about money or power. Ralph was no longer the timid, overlooked outsider he once was. There was something about him, a deep-seated darkness that was now slowly emerging. "And if I refuse?" Rose asked, her eyes like ice. Ralph smiled, but the smile wasn't warm. "Then continue living your life as it is, Rose, but you know, in this family, only the strong get what they want." He turned, walking towards the door. "Think about it. I'm not in a hurry, but I believe you know what's best for you." With those words, Ralph left, leaving Rose standing there, staring intently at the mirror, her mind filled with chaotic thoughts. She didn't know that plots had begun to take root from that moment, and the path ahead wouldn't be as peaceful as before. Rose stood motionless before the large mirror, her hands clutching the edge of the gold-plated sink, her mind swirling with conflicting thoughts. Ralph's words still echoed in her mind, like a seductive whisper, an invitation that was hard to refuse. Ralph wasn't wrong in this family, the strong get everything. If she wanted everything for herself, a partnership with Ralph seemed like an easier path. She took a deep breath, staring at her reflection. Ambition, the thirst for power and money, had been ingrained in her for a long time, pushing her to rise, to achieve what she believed she deserved. Ralph had made a tempting offer. They, working together, could overcome any obstacle, achieve things both of them desired. But then, in the midst of her chaotic thoughts, the image of my face suddenly flashed through her mind. Rose remembered the concerned look in my eyes, the warmth in my gaze whenever he looked at her, and how I always tried to make time for her, no matter how busy I was. Over the past few days, I had been stretching myself to learn and work to prepare for inheriting the company. I may not have been able to give her every moment she craved, but I never neglected her. The jacket I placed on her shoulders, the way I comforted her when she was struggling, all these small gestures showed that I truly cared and loved her. Rose bit her lip, her eyes softening as she thought about her husband. I had never done anything to make her betray me. I loved her with a genuine love, a trust that was unconditional. I had given her everything, including my trust, the opportunity to build her own career. It filled her with a sense of guilt. How could she betray someone who had always been by her side like that? Rose lowered her head, her eyes closing slowly, feeling a deep conflict in her heart. She could choose the path of partnering with Ralph, easily and quickly gaining power, but what would the cost be? Could she live with betrayal, with the guilt weighing heavily on her as she looked into my eyes every day? She shook her head, telling herself, "No, I can't do that." Even if the path beside me might be difficult, it was the path she had chosen when she agreed to be my wife. She couldn't let her personal ambitions overshadow my love, my trust. Rose opened her eyes, looking back at herself in the mirror, her eyes more determined. She wouldn't betray me, she wouldn't betray the marriage she had vowed to. Ralph might have his own plans, but she wouldn't allow herself to be drawn into his scheme. The decision was clear. Rose took a deep breath, stood straight, and adjusted her stained dress. She wiped away the remaining wine stains, feeling a sense of relief at making her decision. She would continue to be with me, standing by me through every challenge. As Rose stepped out of the bathroom, she caught my eye from across the room. I was talking to a few shareholders, but I was still paying attention to her. When our eyes met, I gave her a gentle smile, like a loving greeting. Her heart fluttered, and she knew she had made the right decision. Rose walked over to me, her eyes sparkling, her heart filled with a sense of peace she had thought she'd lost. No matter how challenging the path ahead might be, she wouldn't turn her back on her loving husband. After that night at the party, everything seemed to change quickly for me. From being a son who simply wanted to learn from experience, I began to feel more keenly the responsibility I carried as the heir to my father's company. My name was no longer just the president's son. I began to solidify my position in the eyes of shareholders, colleagues, and rivals in the industry. That party wasn't just an opportunity for shareholders to mingle, but also a chance for me to demonstrate my leadership capabilities, something everyone had been waiting for. As they heard about the plans and strategies I was preparing, many shareholders expressed a desire to work with me. They saw potential in the vision I was building, and more importantly, they began to trust in the company's future under my leadership. My father stood behind me, silently observing, but his eyes were full of pride. He had carried the weight of the entire company on his shoulders for years, and now he was ready to hand the reins over to me. It was a huge responsibility, but it was also an opportunity for me to prove I was worthy of it. A few days after the party, I began meeting with more shareholders, participating in negotiations, and accepting collaboration proposals from potential partners. Rose, of course, didn't miss this opportunity. She entered the conversation with her usual confidence, talking about her plans to develop her small company. I knew she also wanted to hook into this to leverage the expansion and resources of my family's company to help her own grow stronger. I didn't hesitate for a moment. Rose was my wife, and I wanted to see her succeed. Helping her company grow wasn't just a husband's duty, but also because I knew she had real talent. Rose's company, though still small, had begun to make its mark in the investment and business sector she pursued. She didn't need to rely on me, but if I could help, I would do everything to make her company even more successful. "What do you think?" Rose asked as we sat beside each other in my office, her eyes full of hope. "I think if my company could collaborate with your family's company, it would create a huge boost in the market. I know it's still small, but I believe we can do it." I looked at Rose, seeing the determination and ambition in her eyes. "I don't see any reason not to agree," I replied, giving her a gentle smile. "If your company has potential, and I know it does, then helping it grow will be part of our strategy." Rose chuckled, her eyes sparkling as she heard me say that. "I knew you wouldn't refuse," she teased, her tone light, but full of innuendo. I smiled, placing my hand on hers. "I want to see you succeed, Rose. You've come so far on your own, and I'm proud of you. But if we can grow together, then why not?" In the following days, we began to discuss in more detail the collaboration between Rose's company and my family's company. I helped her connect with major partners, and with Rose's efforts, her company began to expand rapidly. I helped her not just financially, but also provided guidance on strategy, market access, and partners. Initially, Rose's company thrived. She entered the market with confidence and a desire for success, attracting a number of partners and clients. But then, once the initial excitement faded, the business started to stagnate. Hasty decisions and a lack of tight management led to the company gradually falling into difficulty. I noticed it even though her company still maintained some progress, things were clearly no longer going smoothly. One evening, as we sat down to talk, I decided to address the issue. "Rose," I began, my voice calm but not hiding my concern, "I've noticed that your company hasn't been as effective as before lately. I think you should reconsider your team and their work efficiency. If it isn't addressed promptly, not only will your company be affected, but it could also drag down the company's partners." Rose paused, her eyes changing instantly. From the fatigue of work, they now reflected a look of suspicion and discontent. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice a little cold. "Are you saying I'm a burden?" I sighed softly, trying to explain. No, that's not it. Rose, I just want what's best for you. If you don't pay attention to the business, everything could go off track. I just want to help you see the problem before it gets worse." But Rose wasn't listening. She stood up, her eyes full of suspicion and hurt. "You think I'm ruining everything, right? You think I'm a burden on you and this company?" I tried to reassure her, but every explanation seemed to push her further away. "It's not like that, Rose. I just want what's best for both of us. If your company goes down, I'm worried it will affect us both and the partners I introduced to you." Rose remained silent for a moment, her eyes turning icy. "Thanks for your concern," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm before turning and walking out of the room. A feeling of helplessness overwhelmed me. I knew I was right, but the way she misunderstood it completely made the situation worse. Rose didn't seem to see my good intentions, she only saw judgment, as if I considered her a burden, someone incapable of managing her own company. As doubt began to bloom in my mind, Rose decided to seek out Ralph. He always had a way of making her feel understood, even though I didn't realize it at first. Ralph had been sowing seeds of doubt about the relationship between me and Rose for a while, and now, feeling misunderstood, she turned to him for support. However, as soon as she stepped out of the house, Rose paused and thought back on what had happened. She knew I loved her and just wanted what was best for her. My blunt words weren't because I looked down on her, but because I wanted to save her company from trouble. But in the heat of the moment, she didn't see that. Rose stopped in the middle of the street, hesitant about the decision to meet Ralph. Should she really trust him? Or was her blind rage leading her down a dead end? But Rose's childish anger had changed everything. She told herself that if I truly cared about her, if I truly loved her as I had claimed, I would have chased after her as soon as she walked out the door, but I didn't. Instead, I let her go silently, thinking she needed time to calm down. Rose felt abandoned, hurt, and her anger boiled over even more intensely. She quickly got out of the house, pressed the car keys, and sat in the luxurious car I had given her. Her heart pounding, her breath quickening, she started the car and sped out of the garage. The road leading to Ralph's apartment blurred in the streetlights. She knew this road well, as Ralph didn't live too far from us. Whenever she was struggling or needed someone to listen, Ralph was always the first person she turned to. He always knew how to make her feel understood and never judged her. On the drive, Rose couldn't stop thinking about our argument. She tried to convince herself that she was right, that Lion, the husband she always thought would protect and support her unconditionally, had made her feel like a burden. If I truly worried about her, I would have chased after her, held her back, and explained everything. But no, I let her go, as if our relationship didn't matter. When she arrived at Ralph's apartment, Rose turned off the car and sat still for a few seconds, staring at the door leading up to his apartment. She knew this decision could change everything, but her anger and hurt had clouded her judgment. She didn't need me in this moment. She just needed someone to listen, someone who would stand by her, and Ralph was always ready to do that. Rose got out of the car, slammed the door shut, and rushed towards Ralph's apartment. She pressed the doorbell, her heart filled with turmoil, but still resolute in her decision. Just a few seconds later, the door opened, and Ralph stood there, his eyes questioning but also showing a clear surprise at her sudden appearance. "Rose? What are you doing here at this hour?" Ralph asked, his eyebrows raised as he saw her flushed face. Rose pursed her lips, trying to hold back her emotions, but her voice still trembled. "I don't know, Ralph, I need to talk. You can listen to me, can't you?" Ralph observed her for a moment, then nodded, opening the door to invite her in. "Of course, come in. I'll get you some water." She stepped into the apartment, the familiar space, but it felt different today. Rose sank into a chair, her eyes glancing around the room before she sighed. In her heart, she knew this was wrong. Going to Ralph when she was having conflicts with me wasn't the solution, but her anger was still bubbling, urging her to continue. Ralph placed a glass of water on the table, sat opposite Rose, and carefully observed her. "Tell me, what's going on? I can tell something is wrong with you." Rose took a deep breath, her eyes glistening, but she didn't shed tears. "I feel like Lion doesn't care about me anymore. Ralphie, he criticized my work, said I'm a burden, and could affect his company. Do you understand? I've been trying my best, but everything's falling apart." Ralph sat silently, listening to Rose pour out her heart, but there was a clear calculation in his eyes. Those eyes looked at her, not just with normal listening, but with something deeper, more dangerous. He clearly understood that Rose was vulnerable and hurt, and it was an opportunity for him to exploit. After Rose finished speaking, Ralph raised an eyebrow, keeping his voice soft yet laced with innuendo. "Rose, I understand how you feel. Lion has always been placed on a pedestal, always seen as the perfect heir, while we are just shadows. I understand what it feels like to be overlooked, to be disregarded." Ralph leaned forward, his gaze directly on Rose, his tone becoming more intimate. "But you know, you and we don't have to live under that shadow forever." Rose raised her head slightly, her eyebrows furrowing. "What do you mean?" Ralph smiled, a smile that was both comforting and seductive. "Lion may think he's doing everything for your benefit, but clearly, he doesn't understand what you really want. He never recognizes your real potential and capabilities." He emphasized each word, as if striking directly at the discontent and pain in Rose's heart. "I do, Rose, you have talent and perseverance. You just need more opportunities and someone to support you." She was silent, her eyes fixed on Ralph, listening to every word he said. She wanted to fight back, to believe that I still loved and supported her, but the hurt and anger in her heart made everything foggy. Ralph sat straight, his voice becoming sharper but still gentle enough that Rose didn't feel pressured. "Rose, let me help you. We can do more than this. But first, you need to stay calm, keep everything normal as if nothing happened. I don't let Lion suspect anything. We'll play our own game, and then, everything will be in our hands." Rose looked up at Ralph, feeling a gentle yet deep impulse within her. Ralph was offering something she had never considered before, a secret alliance, a silent betrayal. But was it worth it? she wondered in her heart, but she couldn't deny that Ralph's words had touched the craving she had always tried to suppress. She was silent for a few minutes, her eyes lost. Finally, Rose sighed, as if the decision had already formed in her mind. "Do you think things will happen the way you say?" she asked, her voice unsure but devoid of resistance. Ralph nodded slightly, his eyes cold but full of confidence. "I'm certain of it, Rose, just trust me. Keep everything normal, keep doing what you're doing, and then, step by step, we'll get what we deserve." Rose was silent again, then finally nodded in agreement. She had chosen her path, a path with no turning back, and she knew that from this moment on, everything would never be the same. After leaving Ralph's apartment, Rose drove back to the spacious house we shared. But when she stepped inside, she was met with darkness. The entire house was enveloped in silence, no lights emanating from any of the rooms, except for a faint light coming from my office. This only further convinced Rose of the truth in Ralph's words. I was only focused on work, wasn't I? She thought to herself, her heart filled with suspicion. But despite that, Rose didn't forget the plan Ralph had instructed her to follow. She carefully walked towards the office door, where the dim light spilled out. Through the crack in the door, she saw me sitting intently over piles of papers, my brow slightly furrowed as I focused on the numbers and financial reports. Seeing me like that, busy with my work, not even noticing her presence, made Rose feel like the distance between us was growing. Rose took a deep breath, regaining her composure. I have to keep everything normal. Thinking this, she stepped into my office, creeping towards me from behind. With a gentle movement, Rose wrapped her arms around my neck, resting her chin on my shoulder, making me jump slightly. "You're working so hard," she whispered, her voice sweet, but still tinged with defiance. "I'm sorry for being so angry earlier. I shouldn't have sulked." I stopped writing, feeling Rose's warm embrace around my neck. A gentle smile crossed my face, and I turned around, pulling her to sit on my lap. "It's okay, Rose," I said softly, my voice genuine but still sincere. "I'm sorry I wasn't clear with you. I just wanted to help you see the problem, not because I looked down on you." Rose smiled faintly, resting her head on my shoulder, feeling like everything was back to normal. But in her heart, she knew things had changed. The suspicion was still there, and Ralph's words echoed in her mind. "Just stay calm, continue as if nothing happened." She remembered Ralph's instructions and knew that things would never be fully the same again. However, in this moment, she decided to temporarily put everything aside, at least in front of me. "You always think of me," Rose whispered. "I just need to learn to understand you more." I kissed her gently on the forehead, feeling the tenderness in her words, not realizing that there were major shifts going on inside Rose. I just wanted to see her bijou, and in that moment, I believed things were resolved. But the truth was that suspicion and ambition were quietly developing in Rose's heart. I sat back in my chair, feeling a sense of relief as Rose seemed to have calmed down, but the work was still piled up in front of me, and I knew I couldn't leave my desk just yet. I turned to look at her, my hand still gently resting on her back as she sat on my lap, her eyes glittering with determination, as if wanting to make up for her anger earlier. "Rose," I said softly, my eyes full of tenderness, "you should go to bed first. I still have a lot of work to do. It'll be late before I finish." But Rose shook her head, clutching my hand. "No, I want to wait for you. I'll be here with you. It's okay." I smiled at her stubbornness. "But I have so much work. You'll fall asleep." "I don't care," Rose replied quickly, a touch of stubbornness in her eyes. "I want to stay." I sighed, no longer arguing. Knowing Rose's nature, once she had made up her mind, it was hard to convince her to change. So I continued to work, still holding her hand. But less than 20 minutes later, when I looked up, Rose had fallen asleep, her head resting on my shoulder, her gentle breath signaling that she had dozed off. I sighed, feeling a surge of affection. She was always like that, stubborn yet incredibly endearing. Gently I lifted Rose, carrying her out of the office in a princess-style embrace. My arms held her petite body tightly, and I tried to tread lightly, not wanting to wake her from her sleep. When I reached the bedroom, I carefully placed Rose on the bed, gently, as if I feared that even a strong movement would wake her. She shifted slightly in her sleep, her brow relaxing as she lay on the soft mattress. I pulled up the blanket to cover her, then leaned down to kiss her gently on the forehead, feeling my lips brush against her smooth skin. "Sleep well, Rose," I whispered, giving her a soft smile. After making sure she was asleep, I returned to my office, closing the bedroom door quietly. I still had a lot of work, but every time I looked at Rose, I felt all the fatigue melt away. She might sulk, be stubborn, but I knew that the love I had for her never changed. But no matter what, I wanted her to have a good night's sleep without worrying about anything. Returning to the pile of documents, I continued to work under the dim lights, but my heart was still warm with the image of Rose sleeping soundly. After that day, Rose seemed to change completely. She started to listen to me and tried to improve the company's situation following the advice I had given her. Things seemed to stabilize, and I felt relieved to see her work progress. She also spent more time at home, complaining and sulking less often. It felt like everything was back on track. But I didn't know that a bigger storm was brewing silently. One day, Rose decided to do something unexpected and thoughtful. She prepared lunch for me and wanted to surprise me at the office. When she arrived, she was told that I was in a meeting. The meeting was running longer than expected, and I wouldn't be back to my office soon. Rose had to wait. She entered my office, a spacious and elegant space with soft light streaming in from the large windows. The room exuded an air of power but was also very personal. On my desk, there was a framed picture I had carefully placed there, a picture of the two of us, looking very sweet and happy. Rose looked at the photo, a flicker of a smile crossing her eyes, but her mind wasn't fully focused on those beautiful memories. She sat down in my luxurious leather chair, starting to fiddle with it, spinning the chair in circles as a way to kill time. However, when the chair stopped and her eyes accidentally landed on the large file cabinet in the corner of the room, she suddenly froze. The cabinet held a collection of important documents, where I always kept confidential company information, plans that only a few trusted individuals were allowed to see. Rose wasn't stupid. She knew the value of these documents, and a bold idea suddenly popped into her head. With a gentle movement, almost like a ghost, Rose stood up and walked towards the cabinet. She glanced around cautiously, making sure no one was in the room, then gently pulled open the cabinet door. Inside were rows of neatly arranged files. She ran her hand over them, searching for something valuable, and after a moment, her eyes stopped on a file labeled important. Without hesitation, Rose quickly pulled out the file. This was what she needed. She didn't forget to rearrange the cabinet to make it look like no files were missing. Carefully closing the cabinet, she put the file in her handbag. To avoid raising suspicion, Rose took a small piece of paper, scribbled a few lines on it. I have something to do, so I have siandart. Remember to eat lunch. She placed the note on the lunchbox she had brought with her and left quickly, but not hastily. She walked out of the office with a heart pounding with excitement, feeling a surge of adrenaline knowing she had just done something dangerous, but at the same time, a sense of exhilaration filled her heart, as if she had taken another step towards what she wanted. That afternoon, after leaving my office, Rose didn't go straight home. She drove directly to her rendezvous with Ralph, not at a restaurant or a cafe as usual. They met in a more discreet location, in a car parked in a dark corner of a parking lot near a luxury hotel, avoiding the attention of anyone. Ralph was already in the car when Rose arrived. As she stepped in, Ralph glanced at her, his eyes showing a clear curiosity and interest when he saw Rose clutching her handbag tightly. She didn't say anything immediately, just sat still for a few seconds to regain her composure. Then, without a word, she opened her bag, pulled out the important file she had just taken from my office, and handed it to Ralph. Ralph stared at the file before taking it, his lips curling into a sly smile. He flipped through the first few pages, his eyes lighting up as he saw the information the file revealed. Secret business strategies of the company, major contracts, and upcoming development plans. It was all in his hands now. "You did great," Ralph said, his voice full of praise and excitement. "With this, we'll have a huge advantage. Lyon's family company's rivals will pay a high price for this information. And not only that, when everything is exposed, Lyon will be left with nothing in his father's eyes." Rose took a deep breath, feeling a mix of regret and a strange sense of power. "Do you think this is really necessary?" she asked, hesitating a little. "I don't want Lyon to get in too much trouble." Ralph gave a cunning smile, his eyes flashing with ambition. "Don't worry, Rose, this is the best thing for both of us. Lyon and his father are too complacent, always thinking they can't fail. But with this information, they'll lose everything." And then Ralph paused for a moment, his sharp eyes fixed on Rose. "Then, I can take Lyon's place. I've always been the outsider in the family, but not anymore." Rose couldn't deny the logic in Ralph's words. She had lived too long in the shadow of the Lyon family, always feeling like she had to strive to deserve the position she held. But now, with Ralph holding this file, she believed they could achieve something much greater. Lyon would face defeat, and when his father was disappointed, maybe Ralph would have a chance to step into that position. "We'll sell this file to the rival," Ralph continued, his expression becoming more serious, "and we'll wait to see how Lyon will handle it. He'll not only lose his father's trust, but the company will suffer a major loss. Then, no one will consider him a worthy heir anymore. And you," Ralph chuckled softly, "will be right where you belong." Rose listened silently, her heart a mixture of excitement and unease. She had gone too far to turn back, and now she had to continue down this path with Ralph. She looked out the car window, watching the streetlights streak past like blurry streaks of light, wondering if this would really lead her to where she wanted to be. But once she had made a decision, Rose knew she had no way back. "Okay," she said, her voice soft but resolute, "we'll follow your plan." Ralph nodded, his eyes full of confidence and ambition. "Just wait to see how it all plays out. I can't wait for Lyon to fall. And then, his father will have no choice but to find someone else to inherit." After the meeting ended, I returned to my office, feeling a sense of relief as I saw the lunchbox Rose had prepared and left on my desk. A small sticky note was attached to the lunchbox, with her familiar handwriting. "I have something to do, so I have to go home first. Remember to eat lunch." I smiled softly, feeling happy and grateful that Rose still cared about me, even though we'd had our differences lately. I opened the lunchbox, the warmth from the food was still there, and I began to eat, feeling peaceful as I thought about Rose, about the time she would prepare food for me. But suddenly, a thought crept into my mind. Rose had been in my office for a long time while she waited for me, and I couldn't help but wonder what she had been doing during that time. Then, a thought struck me. The security cameras. All the offices in the company, including my office, were equipped with cameras for monitoring purposes. Not because I doubted Rose, but simply, I was curious. I wanted to see her expressions while she waited. Imagine her playfully or even affectionately spinning my chair around the desk while she waited for me. With a touch of excitement, I opened my computer and rewound the footage from earlier. At first, I chuckled softly as I saw Rose spinning the chair with a relaxed expression, her eyes still as endearing as ever. But then, the image in the video began to shift. Rose's gaze suddenly stopped at the file cabinet. My heart stopped as I saw her walk towards it, her eyes flashing with curiosity, and she stealthily opened the cabinet door. "No way," I whispered, hoping what I was seeing was just a misunderstanding. But when Rose quickly pulled out a file and carefully tucked it into her handbag, I was practically paralyzed. I didn't want to believe what I had just seen. Rose, the woman I loved and trusted, had she stolen my important documents? My heart pounded faster, a mix of confusion and heartbreak swirling in my chest. I tried to stay calm, telling myself that I needed to get to the bottom of things. Maybe she had a reason that I didn't understand, but the truth was that I couldn't ignore this. I asked my secretary to check the number of documents. At a glance, everything seemed fine. All the files were still in the cabinet as if no one had touched them. But when I counted carefully, I realized that one important file was missing, the one Rose had taken. This only fueled my suspicions even more. Why would she do this? I wondered. She might have made a mistake. Or maybe she had a reason I didn't know. But whatever it was, I needed to confront her and get to the truth. That night, when Rose came home, I decided to confront her. I didn't expose her right away. I wanted to give her a chance. I looked at her for a long time before asking, my tone gentle but laced with innuendo. "Rose, before you came to my office today, was anyone in my office? Or after you left? Did you see anyone come in?" Rose stopped, her eyes flashing with surprise, but she quickly regained her composure. "No, I didn't see anyone," she said, her voice steady, but I noticed her eyes avoiding mine. "I just waited there for a while, then went home." "Nothing special. What's going on?" Her words disappointed me. She was lying. I could sense it. Even though Rose tried to remain calm, she didn't know that I had seen everything through the cameras. But I didn't want to expose her right now. I wanted to see if she could confess and make amends. I sighed, not wanting to let her know my heart was in turmoil. "I understand, it's nothing. Don't worry about it," I replied briefly, then turned and left, leaving her alone in silence. Before going upstairs, I turned back and said, "I'm tired. I'm going upstairs first." Though my heart was filled with many emotions, I still hoped that Rose would have some time to reflect and decide to tell me the truth. But when I lay in bed, I waited and waited, but she never came to confess. She had chosen to remain silent, and it weighed on my heart more than ever. When I entered the house, the soft light from the living room spilled out, making the space feel a little warmer, but there wasn't a trace of warmth in my heart. My heart was still pounding erratically after what I had discovered at Ralph's apartment, and each heavy step I took on the floor seemed to drag with it the weight of the pain I couldn't face. Rose was sitting there, on the couch, her eyes looking at me with a mix of curiosity and anxiety. She walked towards me as soon as I stepped into the house, her lips curving into a gentle smile, but I could clearly see the tension in her eyes. "Where were you?" Rose asked, her voice soft, but I couldn't help but notice the scrutiny behind the question. "I waited for you. It was so late." I couldn't look directly into her eyes. My hand was still gripping my jacket tightly, as if just letting go would make everything disappear and the truth would be revealed, but I wasn't ready to face it with her, with what I had just discovered. I needed more time to gather my thoughts, to find a way to handle this without hurting us both. "Just took care of some business with Ralph," I answered, trying to keep my tone calm, but my heart was in turmoil. I couldn't tell her the truth. Not yet. Rose stopped, staring intently at me, as if she sensed something was wrong. "Is something wrong? You don't look well?" I smiled faintly, trying to hide the chaos in my heart. "No, just tired." It was a long day. I tried to appear normal, as if everything was still the same, but inside, every lie I uttered made me feel like I was sinking deeper into a bottomless pit. "I'm going upstairs first," I said quickly, not waiting for Rose's response. "I need to rest." Rose stood there, saying nothing, just watching me as I walked quickly towards the stairs. I could feel her gaze following me, But I didn't stop. I needed time to think, to organize all the pieces that had just appeared in my mind. As I entered the bedroom, I closed the door and leaned against it, sighing wearily. Rose's bra in Ralph's car. That image kept swirling in my head, making me feel like I was suffocating. Even though all the evidence pointed to betrayal, I still lacked the courage to face the truth. Ralph, I couldn't believe that the two people I had loved and trusted most could betray me this way. I sat down on the bed, my head lowered, my hands clasped together. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know how to face the truth. Everything was too sudden, too painful. The betrayal of both my wife and the adoptive brother I had wholeheartedly trusted. But whatever it was, I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. I would have to confront this. But not right now. I needed time. Time to think, to find a way to handle it, and to prepare for what was coming. In that moment, I just wanted to hold on to the last bit of peace before it all crumbled. In the middle of the night, while I was still trying to catch a few winks amidst the turmoil of emotions, my phone suddenly rang. It was my secretary. She never called at this hour unless it was an emergency. I quickly picked up the phone, my heart pounding. "Mr. Lyon, I have some extremely important news." Her voice was urgent. "The documents we lost. They're about to be handed over to the rival. They've scheduled the transaction." I instantly remembered the files Rose had taken. That's right. Everything suddenly fit together. I gritted my teeth, feeling rage bubbling up inside me. "Investigate the transaction location immediately," I commanded, my voice firm. "We'll take action tomorrow. I want to be there to catch them red-handed." My secretary quickly followed my orders, and after hanging up, I lay back on the bed, my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, unable to close my eyes. Tomorrow, I would end it all. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Rose had prepared breakfast as she always did, but I couldn't bring myself to eat. She looked at me with concerned eyes, but my heart was numb. "You're not eating breakfast?" Rose asked, her voice still sweet, but I noticed a hint of worry in it. I shook my head, trying to stay calm. "I'm busy. I have to go now. Important business today." Rose looked at me, as if she wanted to ask more, but then she remained silent, watching me with a glimmer of suspicion in her eyes. I turned and walked out of the house, not looking back. Whatever happened today would change everything. When I arrived at the transaction location, I was ready with a team of bodyguards and some top executives from the company. We hid in a discreet location, observing the situation. Our rival, the ones who were trying to seize the company's important information, were present and had begun the transaction with the intermediary. But they didn't know that I knew everything. When the right time came, we struck. The rival realized they were about to be exposed and hurriedly tried to escape, but they were too late. My bodyguards intercepted and apprehended them before they could get away. It all happened quickly, leaving them no chance. The intermediary, the one who was doing the transaction for the rival, was apprehended right there. His face was pale, his forehead drenched in sweat as he was interrogated. He knew that what he was doing could cost him dearly. Looking into his fearful eyes, I knew I had a chance to uncover the mastermind behind the whole scheme. "Don't kill me," he gasped, trembling. "I'll tell you everything. The person behind this. It's Ralph. He planned it all. I was just the intermediary." Hearing the name Ralph, my heart sank into an abyss. Ralph, the one I always considered my brother, was now the one who betrayed me and the family. He had been secretly behind it all, plotting to harm me, to seize everything I had. The intermediary continued speaking, his voice full of fear, hoping he could be spared. "I swear I just followed orders. I don't know anything more. Ralph is the mastermind. I just did what he told me." I picked up my phone and called my secretary, my voice low but determined. "Start a full investigation on Ralph. We need to prepare for what's coming." After ending the call, I gave the intermediary a cold look before walking away from the scene. It wasn't over yet, but at least I knew who my enemy was. Very quickly, the investigation into Ralph yielded results I hadn't anticipated. On the surface, Ralph was known as a trustworthy and reliable brother, but it turned out that behind his facade were numerous shady dealings and ruthless tactics in the business world. Detailed reports revealed that he had secretly manipulated many contracts, colluded with rivals to benefit himself, and didn't hesitate to backstab anyone if it helped him advance. Heartbreak, that was the first and most overwhelming emotion that flooded me when I received this information. Ralph had not only betrayed my trust but also the family's. But now, there was no room for weakness or sentimentality. I couldn't forgive him. I decided to catch Ralph and expose all his despicable deeds before it was too late. To make the plan run smoothly, I contacted the intermediary we had apprehended earlier. I told him straight out that if he cooperated, provided all the information about Ralph, and helped us catch him, then I would ensure that he would be treated leniently and might have his sentence reduced. Not surprisingly, the intermediary immediately agreed. He knew that the only way out of this mess was to cooperate with me. In another part of the city, Ralph was sinking into a deep sleep after a brutal and scheming night. His phone rang, waking him up, making him frown unhappily, his head still groggy from the previous night's drinking. His head was pounding like a drum, but he still reached for his phone. The voice of his partner on the other side rang out, full of confidence. "It's done, Ralph. The transaction on the rival's end is complete. The documents are in their hands." Instantly, Ralph felt a surge of exhilaration. A cunning smile spread across his face. Success. Everything had gone according to plan. With the important documents leaked and the rival gaining an advantage, the company would suffer a major loss, and Lion, the brother he had always envied, would be left with nothing but defeat. Who else would take over the position of heir if not him? Ralph quickly started planning his next move. He called the intermediary, who he believed was still loyal and unaware that he had been apprehended and was working with me. "Meet me tonight in the outskirts," Ralph commanded, his tone full of confidence and no doubt about the intermediary's loyalty. After hanging up, Ralph leaned back in his chair, a sinister smile playing on his lips. The game was in his hands. Everything he had longed for, power, status, and recognition, was closer than ever. Lion would never recover from this blow. He couldn't even imagine that the trap he was so confident in setting to take me down was now closing in on him. That night, Ralph drove to the outskirts, where he had made a rendezvous with the intermediary to discuss their share of the profits from the transaction. The road was deserted and dark, with only the scattered headlights of cars illuminating the empty road. Not a single person passing by. Ralph felt confident and elated, thinking everything was going according to plan. His scheme was perfect. He parked his car in a dark corner, waiting. A few minutes later, the intermediary's car appeared, parking next to him. Ralph smirked, got out of his car, and quickly took a seat next to the intermediary. They exchanged a few short pleasantries about how successful the transaction had been, and Ralph couldn't hide his excitement. Everything is going exactly as planned. Nothing can stop me now, he thought to himself. But just then, out of nowhere, police swarmed in, their headlights blindingly bright, and the sound of sirens wailed through the quiet night. Ralph froze, his eyes wide with shock. He couldn't react as a group of police officers charged forward, surrounding the car. The intermediary sitting next to him quickly got out of the car and ran towards me, the one Ralph had once considered his target. I stood there, my eyes cold as I looked towards Ralph, not hiding my disappointment. The police moved towards Ralph, putting handcuffs on him, pulling him out of the car. He began to realize the situation, his mind reeling as he understood that he had been tricked. The intermediary had betrayed him. Ralph struggled, trying to resist, but he couldn't do anything. "Lion, wait. You don't know what's going on," he tried to feign innocence, his voice pleading. "We're brothers. I was just doing what's good for the company. I didn't intend to hurt anyone. You have to understand me. You can't do this to me." I stood still, my gaze unwavering. Those words no longer had any effect on me. Ralph had crossed the line of forgiveness. "You know exactly what you did, Ralph," I replied, my voice as cold as ice. "I gave you many chances, and now you have to pay." Ralph's face shifted instantly from pleading to anger as he realized I wouldn't give in. He began to yell, no longer maintaining his previous composure. "You're a bastard. Lion, you think you're better than me? You'll never get the respect you want. The whole company will crumble. You'll see." Ralph continued to rant and rave, his voice echoing through the darkness. But it was all in vain. The police quickly escorted him to their car, despite his struggles and screams. I stood there, watching him as he was taken away, my heart filled with a confusing mix of pain and determination. The adoptive brother I had once trusted wholeheartedly was now nothing more than a traitor exposed to the light. As much as it pained me, I knew it was necessary. Ralph had chosen this path, and I had no choice but to let him face the consequences. This betrayal wouldn't be easily forgotten, but at least I now knew who my enemy was. After Ralph was taken away, I stood for a long time, watching as the police car disappeared into the night. My mind was heavy, my thoughts jumbled and weary. The betrayal of the adoptive brother I had wholeheartedly trusted was difficult to swallow. But it wasn't over yet. I still had to face Rose, and my suspicions about her were growing stronger by the day. I drove home in silence, each breath trapped in my chest, as if about to burst. When I walked into the house, Rose was already standing at the door, her face worried, and her eyes filled with curiosity. She rushed to meet me, her voice full of concern, but also not hiding a tinge of jealousy. "Lion, where were you all night?" Rose asked, her voice urgent but laced with suspicion. "I feel like you're hiding something from me. Lately, you've been coming and going early and late. Are you seeing someone else?" Her question was like a spark thrown directly into my chest, where anger had been simmering for a long time. The pent-up rage exploded within me, all the suppressed emotions finally reaching their limit. "Rose," I yelled, my voice full of anger and disappointment. "I don't turn things around here. You're the one who betrayed me, not me." Rose froze, her expression changing rapidly, from surprise to fear. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, her eyes showing clear anxiety. I didn't answer right away, but I pulled Rose forcefully, leading her to my office, not giving her a chance to escape or defend herself. Once we were in the office, I went straight to the cabinet, opened it, took out the bra, the most undeniable evidence of betrayal, and threw it right at her. The bra fell at Rose's feet, and she stared intently at it, her body frozen. Her face turned pale, her eyes widening in shock. She couldn't hide her shock and panic. This is yours, isn't it?" I roared, my voice filled with bitterness. "You thought I wouldn't recognize it? It was in Ralph's car. You think I'm so stupid that I don't see what's going on between you and him?" Rose stepped back, her mouth slightly open, but she couldn't utter a word. Her entire body trembled, unable to meet my gaze. The lies and betrayal she had tried to conceal for so long were now exposed to the light. "You thought I wouldn't find out? You thought I would just sit here while you and Ralph did this to me?" I continued, my voice filled with pain and resentment. "I trusted you. I loved you. And this is how you repay me." Rose lowered her head, her shoulders began to tremble, but she still didn't say anything to justify her actions. She was exposed, with nowhere to hide or lie anymore. The silence between us became suffocating, and all that remained was the deep disappointment within me. The woman I had loved and trusted was now just a shadow of betrayal. Rose's silence only fueled the rage in my heart even more intensely. She didn't deny it. She said nothing. She just stood there, looking down at the bra lying at her feet, her whole body trembling. In that moment, all the pent-up emotions I'd been suppressing for so long erupted, sweeping away everything else. I clenched my fists, trying to contain the anger bubbling within my chest, but I couldn't. My heart ached, but my mind had made its decision. I had nothing left to say or explain. Finally, I uttered a single sentence, my voice cold and hard, devoid of any sympathy or patience. "Pack your things. Rose, I don't want to see you here tomorrow. Get out of my house before I lose what little patience I have left." Rose raised her head, her eyes widening in horror. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. "Lion, don't do this. Please give me a chance to explain. Please, I beg you." Her voice was hoarse and trembling, her eyes filled with desperation. But I had nothing left to hear. Her betrayal was too clear. I couldn't forgive her, and I couldn't continue seeing her here in the house I had once hoped to build a happy family with her. I looked directly into Rose's eyes, not allowing any emotions to show on my face. "Don't beg," I said, my voice resolute. "If you have any self-respect left, leave tomorrow morning." Rose stepped towards me, her trembling hands reaching for me. But I quickly pushed her away, refusing to let her touch me. "Lion, please? Don't leave me. I was wrong. I was truly wrong. Give me another chance." I stared at her for a long time, but my heart was set. I couldn't turn back. She had crossed the line. I turned away, not saying another word. Rose collapsed to the floor, tears streaming down her face, but I only heard her muffled sobs behind me as I walked out of the room. Her pleas and apologies were meaningless at this point. The door slammed shut behind me, and I knew this was the end of everything. I stood in the hallway, my back against the wall, feeling the weight of exhaustion press down on my shoulders. My heart was shattered, but at least I knew the truth, and I would never return to those lies again. I sighed, a heavy and bitter sigh, my thoughts pressing down on me. I couldn't believe it, the woman I had loved and trusted dared to betray me in such a painful way. Rose, the one I had thought was the love of my life, had now turned into a traitor. Everything that had been ours suddenly became nothing. The space in the house suffocated me. I couldn't breathe. Everything reminded me of the happy moments we had shared, and now it all felt like a lie. Even though I knew it was too late, I couldn't sleep with so many thoughts swirling in my head. I needed to get out of here. I quickly threw on a jacket and stepped outside, driving to my usual bar. I wanted to get drunk, to forget the pain gnawing at my heart. When I arrived, I ordered drink after drink, trying to numb my emotions with the cold alcohol. Amidst the swirling thoughts and the intoxication, a familiar voice reached my ear. Louisa, the former classmate who had confessed her feelings to me, but I had rejected. She stood there, smiling seductively, her eyes full of confidence as she approached me. "It turns out I'm the only one who's been loyal to you," Lion Louisa said, her voice sweet, but no less insidious. "I told you a long time ago that Rose wasn't good enough for you, and now you see it, don't you?" I looked at her, not sober enough to think clearly. The intoxication had taken hold, and the weakness in my heart made me lose my reason. Louisa's words seeped into my tired mind, making me resist less. In the end, we spent the night together. The next morning, I woke up in the pale light of a strange room. My head was still a bit fuzzy from the alcohol, but memories of the previous night came rushing back. I looked around, seeing Louisa lying beside me, her eyes full of satisfaction when she realized I was awake. But all I felt was a coldness and regret. I turned away and got up, not leaving any emotion in my voice as I said to Louisa, "Forget about it. Last night was a mistake." Louisa raised an eyebrow, slightly surprised by my attitude, but she didn't object. I calmly got dressed and left, leaving Louisa lying there with a fixed gaze behind me. When I got home, I didn't expect anything, but as I stepped through the door, I froze. Rose was kneeling before the door, her eyes red from crying. She hadn't left yet. Rose looked up at me, her eyes filled with remorse and desperation. "Lion, please, forgive me. Don't leave me. I know I was wrong, I'll change, I promise," Rose begged, her voice breaking with pain. But my heart had closed. I couldn't forgive her. I had made my decision, and now I needed to be firm. "Don't beg, Rose," I said, my voice cold. "I've given you enough chances." Rose knelt there, her trembling hands clutching my leg, her eyes pleading desperately. But I didn't budge. It was all too late. I pulled out my phone and called Louisa. I could only do this. When Louisa arrived, I sighed, looking at Rose one last time, and declared, "From now on, Louisa is my girlfriend. The divorce papers are ready, you can leave." Rose went numb, her eyes filled with agony, tears streaming down her face. But she knew she had lost everything. Her betrayal had ended all hope. With no other choice, Rose left silently, her tears flowing endlessly, while I stood there, watching her disappear into the distance, my heart empty. This was the ending we both had to face, no matter how painful it was. As Rose left silently, tears streaming down her face, I stood there, watching her disappear into the distance. My heart was empty, weary, as if all my energy had been drained. This was the ending we both had to face, no matter how painful it was. Everything that had been ours was now only in our memories, and I knew there was no turning back. But it wasn't over yet. Louisa was still here. The woman I had stumbled into a relationship with that shouldn't have happened. The guilt I felt towards myself made me unable to continue this relationship. Louisa may have been trying to insert herself into my life for a long time, but after everything that had happened, I knew I couldn't keep her by my side. I turned to Louisa, my eyes cold but resolute. "Louisa, you should leave too." Louisa looked at me, surprise evident on her face. "What are you saying? We had?" I interrupted her, my voice firm and uncompromising. "What happened last night was a mistake. There is nothing between us. I can't continue like this. Leave." Louisa was confused. A flash of anger crossed her face, but she understood that there was nothing left to hold on to. She was silent for a moment, her eyes scanning over me before she turned and walked out of the house without a goodbye. As the door closed behind her, I stood still for a long time, the silence becoming suffocating. Both Rose and Louisa had left, and now I was left alone, facing the empty house and the chaotic thoughts in my heart. About half an hour later, my phone rang. It was a message from my father. He didn't call, probably because he knew my current state of mind wouldn't be easy to deal with. "Son, I heard about Ralph and Rose. I'm shocked, but we have no choice but to accept the truth. You need to move on and prepare mentally for the upcoming press conference. This is a difficult time, but you have to be strong." I sat down on the chair, reading those short but weighty lines again and again. My father knew everything. He probably felt as heartbroken as I did, not just because of Ralph's betrayal, but also because of my situation with Rose. But my father understood that I couldn't hide from responsibility forever. The press conference I was going to face wouldn't just be a personal challenge, but also a test of my ability to stand strong as the heir to the company. I would have to publicly reveal everything about Ralph being expelled from the family, and about my divorce from Rose. Everything would be laid bare before the public. I took a deep breath, leaned back in the chair, and looked up at the ceiling. My life had changed too quickly, and I had to prepare to face everything that was coming. The press conference that day was far from easy, and from the moment I stepped into the room, I felt the immense pressure weighing down on my shoulders. My mind was still in turmoil after the recent painful events. Rose, Ralph. It was all like a nightmare I couldn't escape. In front of me, a crowd of journalists sat densely packed, camera flashes flickering incessantly. This was the moment I had to confront the truth, no matter how painful it was. I walked up to the podium, mechanically adjusting my tie, my eyes scanning the crowd with an unmasked weariness. I knew this had to be made public, but I never imagined it would come so soon. "Thank you all for being here today," I began, my voice hoarse and weary. "I would like to announce that as of that, Ralph will no longer be a member of my family." Saying those words was like a knife piercing my heart. Even though Ralph had betrayed me, we had once been brothers. We had shared so many memories. A murmur began to spread among the journalists. Some diligently took notes, while others began to prepare more sensitive questions. I knew there would be many things asked, but I wasn't truly ready to face it all. Immediately after, a journalist stood up, tactless and unafraid to ask the question. "There are rumors that the reason Ralph was expelled from the family is because of his affair with your wife. Rose, is this related to your upcoming divorce?" The question felt like a dagger twisting in the pain I was trying to suppress. I looked at that journalist, my heart shaking. But I also knew I couldn't let my emotions take over right now. Rose, despite her betrayal, was still the woman I had loved. I took a deep breath, maintaining a calm tone but making it clear, No, my divorce from Rose is not related to any rumors. We realized we no longer shared the same goals and decided to end our marriage peacefully. My words were soft but firm enough to prevent the journalists from digging deeper. I didn't want to expose the whole painful truth in front of the public. After all, Rose had once been an important part of my life, and I didn't want to turn her into a subject of slander. The press conference ended, and I walked out of the room with a heavy heart. That door had closed, and a new chapter of my life awaited me. As for Ralph, he was thoroughly investigated after the truth about his illegal activities was exposed, with clear evidence from illegal transactions, the leaking of confidential company information, and collaboration with rivals to sabotage the family company. The police didn't take long to complete the case file. After weeks of investigation, Ralph was sentenced to 3 years in prison for charges related to fraud, leaking confidential information, and collaborating with rivals to sabotage the family company. The intermediary who had assisted Ralph in the transactions was given a reduced sentence due to his cooperation with the police in providing information, but he still faced a substantial penalty. Not only Ralph and the intermediary, but those directly involved in the conspiracy, including the company's rival, were investigated and punished. The rival company was fined a huge sum of money, not only to compensate for the damage to my family's company, but also to ensure that they would not be able to continue similar actions in the future. These fines were enough to shake their financial foundation, and they would struggle to recover for a long time. Justice had been served, but there was no joy in seeing the person I once considered my brother in prison. Ralph had destroyed his own life, and his betrayal had left a deep wound in our family. The ending of this story, though not what I had hoped for, was something I had to face. Rose had left, and Ralph was no longer a part of the family. Both had hurt me deeply, but in the end, I had learned that nothing lasts forever. Trust, love, everything can change. However, I also understood that life continued, and I had to keep moving forward. The betrayal had taught me many things about life, about myself, and about the path I would continue to tread. What had happened could not be changed, but I could choose how to live for my future. I would rise from this pain, rebuild my life and the person I wanted to become. Even though my heart had been broken, I knew I could heal it, slowly, piece by piece. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a new beginning, a beginning I was ready to embrace.